afraid the one that I am going to sound, I guess, rather apocalyptic about is food.
The Bank of England governor was criticised for using the word apocalypse this week. Whether it was appropriate in the context of the UK economy, parlous though it is with our 9% inflation, is debatable. But in other parts of the world? With regard to middle and low-income countries, the warnings from international institutions such as the IMF, the World Bank and the UN about the current situation are not so divorced from the apocalyptic description. Many developing countries were economically shattered by the COVID pandemic, watching their tourist revenues collapse and then being forced to take on large volumes of foreign debt to survive. And now the economic fallout of the invasion of Ukraine, in the form of soaring global food and energy prices, is pushing many to the brink of economic and in some cases political collapse. Amid a climax of street protests, Sri Lanka officially defaulted on its debt this week. The World Bank has warned that as many as a dozen developing countries could follow Sri Lanka into default over the next year. And the IMF estimates around 60% of low-income countries are in or near debt distress. There have been protests and riots in countries as diverse as Peru, Indonesia, Pakistan, Tunisia. Analysts say states such as Burkina Faso, Mali and Chad are also close to the brink.
There is a very strong link between high food prices and political instability. If there is one thing that gets people out into the streets to protest, it is the inability to feed their families.
The World Food Programme estimates that 47 million people in some 80 countries are now on the edge of famine. Its director told the UN this week that the starvation risk is being driven ever upward by Russia's blockade on Ukrainian agricultural exports, with some accusing Vladimir Putin of weaponizing global food supplies.
We have enough historical experience to understand the consequences when we fail to act. When a nation that is the breadbasket of the world becomes a nation with the longest bread lines of the world, we know we have a problem.
Some parts of the world are vastly more exposed to famine risk and volatility in global food prices. In advanced countries in 2019, around 6.7% of the population were in moderate or severe food insecurity. In developing countries, it was more than a quarter, but in sub-Saharan Africa, it was 60%. The developing world debt and famine crises are linked. Many governments face an invidious choice between paying external creditors and buying food supplies for their populations. What experts say is that these vulnerable countries need both debt relief and international help in securing food supplies.
We absolutely need global cooperation. We need it to prevent the situation from escalating by a domino of export restrictions. We also need global cooperation to help highly indebted countries deal with their often unsustainable debt burden.
The World Economic Forum, known as Davos, falls next week. More than 50 heads of state and government will be in attendance. The forum's founder, Klaus Schwab, says it will be the most timely and consequential in its 52-year history, given the foundering global economy and the intertwined geopolitical challenges. Intense global cooperation is the plea. But with even economic giants such as the US, the EU and China grappling with severe domestic cost of living problems, collapsing stock markets and possible recession, will they be able to lift their sights and address what is shaping up to be the biggest global economy crisis since 2008?